The desert was cruel after sundown. As the last light faded behind the jagged cliffs, the cold came fast, sharp, biting, and bitter. Winds carried fine dust and the scent of distant mesquite smoke. Dakota, a towering Apache man with shoulders like carved stone, crouched beside his fire. He wore a wolf-hide cloak, its fur silvered with age, and his eyes never rested long. He had spent years learning to trust no one and, even more, learning to live alone. Dakota's camp sat in a shallow basin at the foot of Broken Skull Ridge, miles from any trading post or wagon road. He had built it with his hands. One stone shelter, one water barrel, and a carefully guarded fire pit. Few dared to come this far west unless they were hiding or hunting. He was both. Then came the thunder. At first, it was just the wind knocking down the sky. The clouds rolled thick and heavy, then cracked open. Rain slammed the earth. Animals scattered. Dakota didn't flinch. But something in that storm didn't feel right. There was another sound. Softer than hooves, lighter than a wolf. A voice. He rose slowly, taking the tomahawk from the stump beside him. He moved through the dark with silent steps, eyes narrowing. There, half collapsed against a low mesquite bush, arms wrapped around her chest, was a figure. A woman. She looked like she'd been running for miles. Soaked to the bone, her dress clung to her like wet paper. Her long skirts were torn, boots half falling apart, and blood mixed with mud at her knees. She wasn't crying, just staring blankly at the rain, trembling. Dakota watched her for several breaths. She was white, young, and clearly from a world far removed from his. She should not have survived out here. And yet, here she was alive, barely. "Who are you?" he asked in a low voice. The woman blinked slowly, then managed a faint smile. "I don't know anymore," she whispered, and fainted right there in the dirt. By the time she woke, she was inside Dakota's shelter, wrapped in buffalo hide, near a crackling fire. The air smelled of roasted rabbit and tobacco. Her lashes fluttered, confused. She tried to sit up, but winced in pain. "You ran through Devil's Country with torn shoes?" Dakota said quietly, seated beside the fire, sharpening a knife. "You're lucky the mountain cats didn't find you first." I didn't know where I was going," she murmured. Her voice was smooth but strained, the kind trained by tutors and elocutionists. "I just kept moving." Dakota nodded. Slowly. "You didn't answer my question." She hesitated, then met his eyes. "My name is Anna." He didn't blink. "Not your real name." She looked away, then forced a small, broken laugh. "Maybe not, but it's the one I want tonight." He said nothing, just watched her carefully as the wind outside screamed. She shifted under the firs. "I'm not asking for much," she said softly. "Just one night. Let me sleep, warm. I'll be gone by morning." "You're being followed." She flinched. "You saw them?" "No, but I know what fear looks like. And I know when someone is lying." Anna, or whatever her real name was, went still. Then she whispered, "Will you turn me in?" "To who?" he said. "I don't take orders from white barons or border marshals." Silence stretched between them. Finally she whispered, "I've never slept without someone outside my door before. A guard, a servant, even a dog. I'm not used to quiet." "You'll sleep here," Dakota said simply, standing. "I'll keep watch. Leave at sunrise." She studied him, this scarred, silent warrior offering protection without demand. She didn't know whether to fear him or thank him. "Why are you helping me?" Dakota paused at the door, then answered without turning. "Because the last time I turned someone away, they died." Then he vanished into the storm, leaving her alone in the warmth, heart pounding, mind racing. She curled tighter into the furs, her fingers grazing the small pouch tied inside her corset, a pouch no one could find. Not yet. Outside, Dakota sat beneath the overhang, eyes on the horizon, tomahawk ready. He didn't trust her. She was trouble. He could feel it in his bones. But something in her face reminded him of another time. Another girl. Another terrible mistake. The desert wasn't the only thing that could kill a man out here. Sometimes it was the people you let too close. By the time the morning sun crept over the ridge, the desert had dried its tears. The storm was gone, leaving only cool wind and a sky so clear it could have been made of glass. Inside the stone shelter, the girl stirred. She sat up slowly, blinking at the golden light leaking through the cracks in the wall. For a second, she forgot where she was. Then the scent of wood smoke and leather grounded her again, and the quiet man sitting just outside the door. Dakota hadn't slept. She stepped outside, arms wrapped around herself for warmth, and found him crouched on a rock, sharpening his blade with smooth, practiced strokes. "Thank you," she said, voice rough from sleep. He didn't look up. "You said you'd be gone by morning." "I did." She paused. "But if it's not too much trouble, could you point me toward the river trail?" Dakota finally turned, eyes cool but steady. "You're not from here. You wouldn't make it 5 miles before they found you." "They?" "The ones chasing you. Or worse, Apaches who don't ask questions like I do." She shifted uncomfortably. "I thought you were Apache." "I am," he said. "But not all of us live by the same laws." A long silence settled between them. She stared down at her muddy boots, ashamed. Then, quietly, she said, "I wasn't lying about needing help. But I didn't tell you everything." Dakota said, "Nothing, only waited. My name isn't Anna," she swallowed. "It's Seraphine. Seraphine Roan." The name struck like a blade. He knew it. Everyone did. Roan land baron, cattle lord, man who built his fortune on stolen land and crushed treaties. The Roan family had a reputation soaked in blood and iron. And Seraphine, she was his only child. The one said to be as cruel as her father. Some claimed she once had a servant whipped for wrinkling her gloves. Others swore she laughed while watching homesteads burn to clear land for her horses. Dakota narrowed his eyes. Why would a baron's daughter be sleeping in the dirt with blood? On her knees? She laughed bitterly. Because gold and power don't keep you safe from monsters, especially not the ones your father invites to dinner. She looked him in the eye. I ran. That's the truth. He didn't flinch. Ran from what? She looked away. My engagement. He waited again. My father promised me to a man named Malric, a railroad enforcer. He doesn't wear a badge, but everyone obeys him. He's killed men just to make a point. Her fingers trembled. And he wanted me like a trophy. My father agreed. Said I'd be safer with someone who could protect the family name. And you didn't want that life? I wanted something that wasn't cold, something I didn't have to fake. Dakota studied her face. She wasn't wearing makeup anymore. The dirt and the storm had stripped it away. She looked young, tired, but also maybe truthful. You steal from them? He asked, voice like gravel. She blinked. What? You carry something. He said, you touch your corset every few minutes. You're guarding something. That's why they're hunting you. Her breath caught. Dakota stood slowly, towering above her. If you want my help, I need truth. Seraphine hesitated, then reached inside her bodice and pulled out a small leather pouch. Inside were folded documents, maps, ledgers, bank slips with Roan seal. Dakota didn't touch them, but he understood. You took his money, he said flatly. I took proof, she corrected. Proof of everything: bribes, stolen land deeds, troop movements, things that would ruin him. Why? Because if I didn't, I'd never stop being his daughter. Dakota stared at her for a long time, wind stirring his black hair. like a raven's feathers. Then he looked out toward the canyon. You'll need a guide. Her eyes widened. You'll take me? I'll get you to the river trail, he said. After that, you're on your own. Seraphine stepped closer. Why are you helping me again? He turned just once. Because you're not the first runaway who came to me with blood on her hands. But you might be the first who admits. She didn't know what that meant. Not yet, but it made her trust him more than she should doubt as they packed the mule and saddled up. The morning sun rose behind them, two shadows walking toward danger, one carrying the sins of a powerful family and the other trying to bury his own. The sun was halfway up the sky by the time they left camp. Dakota led the mule down narrow switchbacks carved into the cliffside, his long legs moving effortlessly over loose gravel. Seraphine, clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders, followed with less grace. Her feet ached. Every muscle protested. Still, she didn't complain. She had chosen this path. The canyon walls narrowed around them, high red stone cliffs pressing in like sentinels. Below, a creek trickled through the wash, barely a whisper this late in the summer. Somewhere far ahead lay the river trail, and beyond that the New Mexico border, freedom. But Dakota kept stopping, watching, listening. Seraphine noticed it first when they passed a shallow bend in the path. He knelt, fingers brushing the ground, his face unreadable. What is it? She whispered. He held up one hand for silence. There were boot tracks, 3 sets, fresh, less than a few hours old. They weren't Apache prints, too heavy, too careless. He stood, jaw tight. They came here, he said, last night. While we slept, her breath caught. They were that close? They must have seen the smoke from my fire, or your trail. His tone held no blame, just grim truth. Then they turned back. Why wouldn't they follow through? Because they weren't sure who was here. Or they were waiting for backup, she swallowed. They'll come back? Yes. Seraphine looked around at the endless rock. The sky too open above them. Then we need to move faster. Dakota nodded. We'll take a different path. Not the one you want. She frowned. But you said, I said I'd get you to the river, he interrupted, already leading. The mule backed toward the cliffs. I didn't say how. They scrambled up into a side ravine, barely wide enough for one person at a time. Loose shale slipped beneath their boots. Cactus and scrub brushed her arms. There was no trail here, just instinct. You've done this before, she said breathlessly. He glanced over his shoulder. Too many times. They hiked in silence for an hour before she spoke again. You didn't ask why I took the documents. I don't need to, he replied without looking back. But you should. You should know what you're risking your life for. He stopped suddenly and turned to face her. His eyes were hard. I'm not risking anything for you, he said. I'm doing this because the men chasing you will hurt others if they aren't stopped. That map you carry, that ledger, it's more dangerous than you realize. Seraphine's face darkened. I do realize. That's why I ran. Dakota looked away. Maybe. They continued in silence. By late afternoon, they reached a ridge that overlooked the lowlands. From here, they could see the sparse lines of civilization-distant smoke trails, a cattle herd far off, maybe even a rail line glinting under the sun. The river trail cut through it all, winding like a silver thread toward freedom. Seraphine leaned on a boulder to catch her breath. You know they'll never stop, right? My father's men? They'll chase me to the ends of the earth. Dakota didn't respond. He was scanning the horizon again. She looked at him, frustration mounting. Why won't you talk to me? He glanced at her. Because I don't trust you. Fair, she admitted. I wouldn't trust me either. Dakota looked back toward the canyon. You know what Apache say about white folks who run? Seraphine raised an eyebrow. No. They don't run unless they're hiding something or someone. She blinked. Which one are you? He asked Dot. She hesitated. Maybe both. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. You're finally telling the truth. Just then, he stiffened. His eyes snapped to the south. What is it? She asked quickly. Dust. She squinted in the same direction. In the far distance, a faint plume of dust curled upward like smoke riders. How far? She whispered. Too close, he said. We'll move through the dry wash below. They'll take the main trail. If we're lucky, we'll stay ahead of them. And if we're not, he gave her a look, then you'll find out what it means to trust someone who has nothing left to lose. With that, he started down the hill, his massive form moving swiftly through the sage and thorns, vanishing into the harsh beauty of the wild. Seraphine followed faster this time, because now she knew death was no longer behind her. It was beside her. And the only thing between her and ruin was a silent man who had already lost everything, except, maybe, his sense of honor. The town of Dry Fork sat baked into the earth like a forgotten bruised sun, bleached, wind-scoured, and mean. It had one saloon, 2 churches, and a jail that had been burned down twice in the past 6 months. The people who stayed here didn't ask questions, and they didn't look too hard at the boots tracking dust through the main street. But on this particular morning, the mood had shifted. 2 black-coated men rode into town under a rising sun. They didn't speak much, but their presence made everyone nervous. One of them pinned a notice to the post outside the general store, and by noon, folks were whispering over whiskey and coffee about what it said. Reward, $500 for information. Leading to the return of Miss Seraphine Roan, daughter of Baron Silas Roan of Stone Mercy Ranch, missing, presumed kidnapped. Dangerous company suspected. The picture underneath was grainy, but recognizable. Long golden hair, hard-set eyes, and the faint smile of someone who always got her way. She's gone missing? Asked the barkeep, squinting at the poster. Ain't that the same one who had old man Jensen whipped for building a fence too high? Another man spat in the dust. Or the girl who ordered that Navajo cook dragged out by his collar for looking her in the eye? The men murmured. The girl had a reputation. Seraphine Roan was beautiful but cruel, born to wealth, raised by power, and feared. Some said she was her father's iron hand. Others claimed she was his greatest weapon, more vicious with a smile than most men were with a gun. She once had a rival's horses poisoned because they beat hers in a county fair. She'd laughed when a boy lost his finger working her stables. She called it a lesson in respect. No one believed for a second that she had been kidnapped, and yet she was gone. Vanished into the desert without a trace, and now her father's private soldiers were sweeping the land like bloodhounds. That alone made people nervous, because when the Roans wanted something, they didn't ask politely. Far from town, in the hills where the road ended and the canyons opened wide, Seraphine crouched beside Dakota in the shadow of a jagged boulder. They'd traveled most of the night, crossing a dried riverbed and winding through rock formations that looked like teeth. Dakota had stopped only once to listen. Now, as they rested, Seraphine stared at him with a mix of curiosity and exhaustion. You ever hear of Stone Mercy Ranch? She asked, pulling her shawl tighter. Dakota didn't look at her. I've heard of your father, I figured. She sat quietly for a while, then said, You probably think I'm like him. Dakota didn't answer. She picked up a small rock and tossed it toward the cliff. I was, once. That made him look at her. She gave a half smile, bitter and brittle. I used to think I was untouchable. I could snap my fingers and ruin lives. I sent a dozen families off their land because I didn't like how their houses looked from our porch. Dakota said nothing. I thought I was powerful, she said. Turns out I was just his daughter, a pawn. A pretty pawn. You could have stayed, he said. Lived rich, safe. Why run? Because he wanted me to become worse than I already was. Her voice cracked. He wanted me to marry Merrick and help take land from the tribes your people. He said, You're a roan. You finish what I start. Takota's face was carved from stone. And I almost did it, she whispered. I would have. But I saw what Mauric did to a man who couldn't pay taxes. I saw what my father laughed at. I realized that if I didn't leave then, I'd become something I couldn't come back from. Takota finally spoke. Maybe you. Already did, she nodded slowly. Maybe. They sat in silence. Wind whispered through the rocks. Somewhere below, the sound of horses echoed faint, but real. Takota stood. We move, now. As they scrambled higher, Seraphine glanced back at the desert below, where her father's men would soon be combing the ground. She was no longer the girl in the poster. No longer the golden thing protected by gates and guards. She was hunted. Bruised, filthy. But maybe for the first time in her life, she was finally choosing who she wanted to become. They rode through broken lands where few dared to travel cactus country, where sharp rocks split hooves and the sun burned through skin. Takota knew every turn of it. The wind whispered to him in ways others couldn't hear. He was made for places like this, wild and full of silence. Seraphine, though, was not. She winced every time her horse stumbled on loose stone. Her hands were blistered. Her corset had been abandoned days ago, traded for freedom of breath and motion. Dust coated her lashes, and her lips cracked from thirst, but she didn't complain. Not anymore. Takota noticed she was still dangerous. He hadn't forgotten that. But she was changing. Or maybe just unraveling in front of him. When they stopped at a high bluff to rest, Seraphine sat beside him in the shade of a boulder, her arms wrapped around her knees. You always this quiet? She asked. Takota didn't answer. She smiled. Faintly. You're not like the men I was raised around. They talk to hear their own voice. You listen. Still, he said nothing. He was watching the ridgeline. Always watching. She nudged him gently. Don't you ever wonder what people say about you? He turned his head slightly. No, she studied him. They'd probably call you a savage. Takota met her gaze, unblinking. And what do you call me? Seraphine looked down. A man who could have let me die, but didn't. He turned back to the horizon. Later that evening, they made camp beneath an overhang of twisted rock. Takota lit a small fire with dry brush, then reached into his pack and pulled out a worn deerskin pouch. Inside were strips of dried meat and parched corn. He handed her some. She took it without a word, but after a moment she asked, Why do you live alone? He stirred the fire with a stick. Because I trusted the wrong people. White men? He nodded once. Army said they wanted peace. Asked me to guide them. Said they needed help finding renegades. I believed them. So I took them through the high passes to the winter camps. She didn't move. They didn't want renegades. They wanted women, children, old ones. His voice was a low growl now. They set fire to everything. Shot anyone who ran. Seraphine covered her mouth. I tried to stop them. They turned their guns on me too. He looked into the flames. I lived. No one else did. Silence stretched long and painful between them. I'm sorry, she whispered. He glanced at her. So when you ask why I live alone now, you know. She reached for the fire, warming her hands. I used to believe men like you were the enemy. My father always said the Apaches couldn't be trusted, that they were savages standing in the way of progress. Takota gave her a long, unreadable look. And now? I think my father's the savage. He didn't reply. The wind picked up that night. Coyotes cried from a ridge far away. Seraphine lay awake, staring at the stars, listening to Takota. Breathe nearby, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were too loud. Then, just before dawn, she rose and quietly moved to the saddlebags. Her hands were steady, practiced. Inside one pouch was a rolled hide containing old maps, military charts, Apache trails, hidden water sources. She found what she was looking for and unrolled a section, squinting at it by the low firelight. Then, she took a piece of charcoal from the fire's edge and marked it. 1 dot. 1 path. She rolled it back and returned everything as she found it. But when she turned around, Dakota was standing behind her. He didn't say a word. Her mouth opened, but no lie came. Not this time. I needed to be sure, she said softly. In case something happens, that I could find my way. He stared at her, cold. I wasn't stealing it, I swear. Still, he didn't move. Dakota. Finally, he spoke. I told you the truth about my past. You still don't trust me. I'm trying. Then stop acting like you've always got a knife in your hand. She lowered her head. Old habits. Break them, he said. Or next time, I won't stop to ask questions. Then he turned and walked away into the darkness, leaving her staring after him, guilt and shame twisting deep in her gut. And maybe something else, too, because she hadn't realized it until that moment. But she wanted him to believe in her, not just because she needed his protection, but because she didn't know who she was without someone like him to hold her accountable. They traveled in silence the next day. The tension between them had shifted, less like strangers and more like two people trying not to say the wrong thing. Serafini walked with her head down, her mind churning. Dakota was distant, more alert than usual, and colder in his glances. He hadn't spoken since catching her with his maps the night before. She hadn't meant to betray him. But the habit of scheming, of looking for angles, escape routes, control was still in her blood. And Dakota had every right to mistrust her again. Still, he hadn't left her behind. By midday, they reached a dry gorge with a split path. One trail led east, deeper into Apache territory, the one Dakota clearly preferred. The other curved north, toward Fort Buchanan and the old cattle roads, where danger followed but so did freedom. We'll rest here, he said, voice gruff. Seraphine unsaddled her horse and stretched her aching legs. The land was quiet except for the wind brushing through thorn trees. She watched Dakota as he knelt to fill his canteen from a trickle of water running down a rock face. His movements were always efficient, controlled. That's when she noticed something strange. The leather saddlebag Dakota had carried since day one, the one he never let her touch, was missing its flap buckle, and something inside shimmered. While Dakota was still distracted, she crept closer, just enough to see inside was a long, curved blade. It wasn't a tomahawk. This was ceremonial, beautiful. Its handle was wrapped in rawhide, the blade engraved with symbols she didn't recognize, Apache symbols. And next to it lay something even stranger, a folded white cloth, with the faded red emblem of the U.S. Cavalry. She blinked. A soldier's sash? It was too clean to be a trophy, too carefully preserved to be discarded loot. Her breath hitched as a possibility dawned on her. Dakota had worn that once, or someone close to him had. He wasn't just a warrior. He'd been in the army, or worked beside it, or lost someone to it. Put it back. His voice cracked like a whip behind her. She spun, guilty, caught. I wasn't trying to steal anything, she stammered. Dakota strode forward and closed the saddlebag with a single hand, his eyes sharp. That's twice you've gone looking where you shouldn't, he said. What is it this time? Another map to sell? No, she said quickly. I saw the cloth. The cavalry colors, I didn't know. He stared at her a moment longer, then said softly, You know nothing about what I've lost. Then tell me, she said, stepping toward him. Tell me so I understand. I don't owe you anything. No, but maybe I owe you more than I've said." That stopped him. She took a breath. "My father doesn't just want me back to protect his name. He needs me silenced. I took more than maps and deeds. I took proof of who paid for the raids." "Your raids?" His jaw clenched. "I'm saying some of the worst massacres weren't rogue commanders. They were hired. My father brokered it. The army took credit, but they weren't alone." "You have this proof?" "Yes, in that pouch I carry." She looked at him evenly. "Your people deserve to know." Dakota's eyes narrowed, searching hers for deceit. "You think carrying guilt makes you righteous?" he asked. "No," she whispered, "but carrying silence would make me just like him." He said nothing for a long time. Then he looked away. "We'll leave in an hour. Dakota, rest. You'll need it." She obeyed, but her thoughts ran wild. She'd seen something in his eyes, a fracture in the calm. That cloth, the blade, it wasn't just memory. It was a wound. A life he buried, and now she'd touched it. That night, when the fire burned low, Dakota sat alone, turning the old blade over in his hands. He didn't sleep. He hadn't for years, not really. That cloth had once belonged to his younger brother, forced into the cavalry during one of the Army's civilizing missions. He died in uniform, killed by Apache warriors who didn't know he was blood. Killed in a fight Dakota had tried to prevent. Now Serafini carried her own truth like a spark ready to ignite every side of a war that still burned in these hills. He watched her sleep beside the fire. She was trouble. And yet, she hadn't run. Not yet. The moon hung low, swollen and heavy with warning. Dakota had barely slept the night before, and neither had Seraphine. Something in the wind had changed, quieter than usual, too still. The animals moved differently. The crows had vanished from the hills. Even the distant coyote howls had stopped. Trouble was close. By the time they reached the plateau above Snake Hollow, the sun was already rising behind the crags. The trail had narrowed to almost nothing, sharp shale, dry as bone, and open sky for miles. They were dangerously exposed. Dakota scanned the horizon. Then he saw dust low to the ground. Fast-moving.riders.3, no-5. Coming hard from him. The east, taking the old mining trail. Dakota cursed under his breath. They'd circled wide, tracked them from a different direction. Seraphine saw them too. "Oh no," she whispered. "It's him. That one in front." Dakota didn't need to ask who she meant. The man leading the group was tall, broad, dressed in all black like a shadow that bled into daylight. His coat flapped like a storm flag, and his horse was darker than sin. He didn't carry a badge, but his name was known across the territory. Malric, her father's enforcer. The man she was promised to. The man she ran from. "We have to go," she said, panic rising. Dakota didn't move. "No," he said. "We make our stand here." Seraphine's breath caught. "What?" "This ridge. One path up, 2 rocks to cover us. It's our best chance, but they'll kill you." He looked at her calmly. "Maybe, but not before I slow them down." She shook her head, voice cracking. "Dakota, I never meant for you to get caught up in this." "You think I helped you by accident?" he said quietly. "No, I chose this. I knew who you were. I knew what danger followed you." She stared at him. "I just didn't know I'd start caring." He turned, grabbed his rifle, and knelt behind the stone edge. His tomahawk was already strapped at his side. He loaded slowly, calmly, like a man with no fear of dying, only of failing. She didn't know what to say. So she did the only thing she could. She picked up a pistol from his gear, checked the rounds like he'd taught her the night before, and crouched beside him. "You ever fired one before?" he asked. "Not outside a ballroom demonstration." His lip twitched. "Aim low." The riders thundered closer, Now visible 5 men, rifles raised, coats flapping. Malric led them, expression unreadable beneath his hat. When he saw the figures on the ridge, he didn't stop. He dismounted smoothly like he was at a dinner party. The others fanned out behind him. Then he called out, "Miss Roan." His voice carried like a shot through dry air. "Your daddy's worried sick." You gave us all quite a fright. Seraphine's hands trembled around the pistol. Dakota remained silent. Malric took a slow step forward. "You come down now, sweetheart. We'll put this whole silly mess behind us." "She's not going anywhere," Dakota called out. Malric's head tilted. "You her new bodyguard?" "I'm the reason you haven't already bled into the sand." That made the others flinch. "But not Malric. She's property," Malric said, voice calm. "You think you're protecting a woman. You're not. You're standing between a baron and what's his." Seraphine stood, raising her voice. "I'm not his anything." That made Malric grin. "You don't get to rewrite your past, darling. You don't walk away clean. You come back, or we drag you back. Your choice." She looked at Tako. His jaw was set. His rifle aimed, and then gunfire erupted. The first shot came from Dakota. It hit one of Malric's men square in the chest, sending him spinning backward off his horse. The second was Malric's. Aimed too high, Dakota had already moved, circling wide. Fast as a desert storm. Chaos. Seraphine fired once, missed. Fired again, this time grazing a man's leg as he charged up the trail. Dakota moved like a ghost, using stone and brush like old allies. His tomahawk sang once then again until only Malric remained. He stood at the bottom of the trail, blood on his coat, gun empty. And Seraphine was staring down at him, gun shaking in her hand. "Do it," Dakota said softly. "End it." "But—" She hesitated. And Malric looked up at her, not with fear, but with something worse. "Pity. You think he loves you?" Malric rasped. "You're still a Roan. You'll always be a Roan." She closed her eyes. Then fired. The smoke hadn't settled, and the buzz of gunfire still echoed faintly across the plateau. Seraphine stood trembling, her pistol loose in her grip, smoke curling from the barrel. Malric lay sprawled below, blood soaking into the dust. His lifeless eyes stared up at her, accusing, empty. Still, she had pulled the trigger. Dakota approached slowly, scanning the ridge for any movement. When he was sure the others were dead or fled, he turned his attention to her. "You did what you had to," he said quietly. She nodded, but her breath caught in her throat. "No, I did what I was raised never to do." Her voice cracked. "I killed a man. You saved yourself. I could have waited. You would have taken the shot." Dakota looked down at Malric's body, then back at her. "Maybe, but this wasn't mine to end." That silenced her. They buried the bodies in a shallow ravine a mile off trail. Seraphine worked with shaking hands, trying to ignore the blood. On her sleeves, the feel of rough earth against her skin. Dakota said little, but every movement of his was deliberate, focused, measured. By sundown, they returned to the camp they had left hours earlier. Changed people. The fire cracked gently. Between them now, they didn't eat, just sat in silence until Seraphine spoke. "I'm not proud of my name," she said, staring into the flames. "Not anymore. Not since I saw what he did, what I helped him build." Dakota remained quiet. "I thought if I ran far enough, fast enough, I could become something else. But every time someone says, 'Roan,' I feel it like I'm dragging a chain no one else can see." He finally met her eyes. "And yet you fought him." She looked down. "What am I now?" "I'm not your people. I'm not his. I'm not even." "Sure, I'm mine." Dakota leaned forward. "Tell me what you're afraid of." She didn't hesitate. "That when this is over, you'll ride off and forget me." He didn't speak right away. His hands rested calmly on his knees, but his eyes searched hers like he was reading every word she never dared say. "You think I would forget you?" he asked softly. I think I don't know what I mean to you," she admitted. Fire snapped between them. The wind picked up dust and scattered it like ash across the dirt. He stood and walked slowly to where she sat, then knelt before her, his massive frame lowering until his eyes were level with hers. "You're a fire I didn't see coming," he said. "I was living half a life before you showed up at my camp." "That night," she swallowed, "you came into my world like a storm, full of lies, full of danger," he continued. "And I should have sent you away. But I didn't, and now I don't know how to go back." A tear slipped down her cheek. "So, what am I to you?" He raised a hand, brushing a thumb gently across her jaw. "You are a reason," he said, "to keep going, to believe that even what's broken can be rebuilt." She leaned into his touch, the warmth of his hand grounding her, steadying her. Then she asked the question that had burned in her heart for days. "Would your people ever accept me?" He didn't flinch. "Some would hate you. Others would watch you, waiting to see if you walk or stay. And you?" "I don't care what they say," he answered. "If you walk beside me, you walk as mine." The words made her eyes brim again, but this time with something more than guilt or fear. Hope. Real, sharp-edged, terrifying hope. She reached out and took his hand, and there, beneath the stars and the endless western sky, Seraphine Roan. Baron's daughter, the liar, the runaway, finally felt something she hadn't known in years: belonging. The fire was low and warm, its embers glowing like buried gold. The night was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that warned of danger. This silence breathed. It wrapped around the camp like a blanket, soothing rather than smothering. Seraphine lay beside Dakota, her head resting near his shoulder. Neither of them spoke, and neither needed to. Words had done their work for now. Still, as the hours passed, something inside her stirred an ache not of fear, but of memory. A reminder that the peace they'd found was borrowed, and tomorrow might demand it back. "I used to believe," she whispered, "that people like me don't get forgiven." Dakota didn't move. "People like you?" "Baron's daughters. Liars, runners. I used charm like a mask and cruelty like a sword. I thought that made me strong." He turned his head toward her. "You were surviving." She met his eyes. "But it still hurt people. Even if I hated my father's world, I knew how to live in it. And I played that part too well. The gowns, the smiles, the secrets." He studied her face for a moment, then reached into the pouch at his side. He pulled out a feather-long, soft, painted in ochre and ash. "This belonged to my sister," he said, "before the soldiers came. Before the rail split the land." Seraphine looked at it with reverence. "What happened to her?" "They said she was taken east. Some say she died. Others said she was married to a man who never learned her name." Seraphine looked away, heart heavy. "I never knew the truth," Dakota continued, "but I kept this. Not to remember how she left, but who she was." He held it out to her. She shook her head. "I don't deserve it." "It's not a reward," he said. "It's a promise." She took it in trembling hands. The feather was warm, somehow alive with memory. "She was bold," he said. "Like you, soft-spoken but fierce. She would have liked you, Seraphine." Her name in his voice was like a song she didn't know she needed. "You said people like you don't get forgiven," he added. "But forgiveness isn't given by birthright or by blood. It's earned in the fire." She ran a finger down the shaft of the feather. "And have I earned it?" He gave a slight nod. "You've burned, Seraphine, but you haven't turned to ash. That means something." A breeze rustled the canyon grass. Somewhere in the hills, an owl called. She looked up at the stars. What do we do now? We ride, he said. West, maybe north. Away from your father's lands. She hesitated. And your people? Will they follow? Some already have. I sent a scout with a signal days ago. If they meet us, it'll be near Red Rock. She gave a small laugh. You really planned for all this? I planned for you to be hunted, he said honestly. But I didn't plan for you to want to stay. They both fell silent. Then she leaned forward, her lips brushing his shoulder. I don't just want to stay, she said. I want to. Build something new, something honest. You will, he said. But not alone. She closed her eyes. Holding the feather-close dot, it no longer felt like a borrowed symbol dot, it felt like a beginning. The wind shifted just before sunrise, dry and cold, sweeping down from the mountains with a warning bite. Dakota was already on his feet, scanning the horizon. Seraphine rose silently beside him, still wrapped in the wool blanket he had given her the night they first met. But the girl he had once found trembling near his fire was gone. In her place stood a woman with iron in her spine and truth in her eyes. She saw them, first distant figures cutting through the canyon trail, dark horses, black coats, and at the center, a silver-buckled brood on a white stallion. Her father, Baron Edwin Roan, had come with 6 men and a small cannon hitched to a wagon. It was no longer a rescue, it was an execution. He brought a war party, Dakota said flatly. No, she whispered. He brought his pride. They didn't run. There was no point. Tia Day stood tall, a silent shadow beside her. Behind them, in the trees, 6 Apaches waited in silence. Dakota had been right, his people were watching. Some had come, but this wasn't their fight. Seraphine stepped forward. When her father stopped just 50 feet away, his glare cut through the morning like a blade. Seraphine, he spat. Get on the horse, now? She didn't move. I'm not going anywhere with you. Don't test me, the Baron growled. You've embarrassed me, lied, consorted with savages. But I'm giving you a chance to reclaim your name. I don't want it, she said. That silenced him. I buried your men, she added. The ones you sent after me. I killed Malric. His face turned crimson. You've lost your mind. No, I've finally found it. Roan leaned forward in his saddle. You think he'll keep you? He'll use you. He'll discard you. He already could have. But he didn't. He treated me with more kindness than you showed me my entire life. The Baron raised a gloved hand. His men cocked rifles. Dakota stepped in front of her. Seraphine placed a hand on his chest and moved past. Him? No, she said. This is between him and me. She walked 10 paces forward, barefoot, dust curling around her. The sun lit her hair like fire. If you kill him, she said, you kill me too. Roan's jaw tensed. You're not serious. She met his eyes, those same cold eyes she once tried to earn love from. I'm done letting fear decide who I am. The Baron's hand hovered, trembling in the air. A single war cry echoed from the trees high, sharp, haunting, then silence. Roan blinked. He looked again at the ridges, the brush, the shadows between the trees. They were surrounded. He wasn't in control anymore, and his daughter no longer feared him. His hand dropped. He pulled back the reins and turned his stallion without a word. One by one, the other riders followed. They left the cannon. They left their pride. They left in shame. Seraphine stood still until the last hoofbeat faded. Only then did her shoulders drop. Dakota walked to her slowly, wrapping a blanket around her again. You didn't need a gun, he said quietly. You were the weapon. I didn't want to win, she murmured. I just wanted to end it. He nodded. And then only then did the hidden warriors emerge. Young, old, painted, braided. The people, Dakota's people. A woman approached Seraphine. Elderly, with weathered hands and eyes sharp as glass, she studied the girl in silence, then reached out and touched the feather Serafini still wore in her braid. "This one walks with fire," she said in Apache. Dakota translated softly. "She says you belong." Seraphine's eyes welled, but this time she didn't cry. She just nodded quietly. "I do," she whispered. That night, under a sky filled with stars, the Apache danced Dot and Seraphine. No longer Roan's daughter, no longer a runaway, danced. With them, she had been given one night of shelter, and in return she gave them everything she was.